Welcome back for episode 3 of Champions of the Mic. I'm here with a special guest named Mr. Vincent Pearson. Hello, Mr. Vincent.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for helping me out with this. So would you like to indulge our audience in a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm sure. I graduated from Virginia State University 2011. I studied sport management. Since then, I've had a great career in sports. I've worked in college athletics. I've worked in pro sports. I've worked at league offices. I left sports for a little while and worked on Wall Street with Bloomberg. And since 2020, I've been an entrepreneur, managing my own business, doing D&I consulting, and also the founder of the Black Sport Business Academy, which connects with HBCU students who want to work in the sports and entertainment industry. So that's what I'm working on now, but excited to get into this conversation.
Thank you so much. Now, as far as since we're both VSU grads, and you got your master's, right, at in sports management, correct?
That's right. I got my master's in sport business management and then my MBA as well, so a master in business. I did that at the University of Central Florida at the DeVos Sport Business Management program.
Okay. So, being that one of the topics that I would like to discuss with you is something that's going on currently in the sports world today with just us as African Americans. Um, it's hard for us as African Americans to, I guess, level. I don't want to say level up. That's not the good technical word to use. But just to get get a one up on the competition as far as jobs are concerned. Recently there was an African American who just became the first premier referee coach for the Premier Soccer League. And I just wanted to get your take on, since you are in the sports management world, as far as getting African American students who go to HBCUs into trying to help them get into the sports world. What do you think has played a role, or what do you think? Why do you think that African Americans might be overlooked as far as trying to either get into that industry, or just once they're in that industry, why does it take so long for African Americans to succeed in that? If you understand what I'm saying.
No, I think I do, and feel free to stop me if I go into a direction that wasn't your question.
Mhm.
But what I'm hearing is essentially why do we see black and brown folks underrepresented in the sports industry?
Right.
And even more specifically, why do we see black and brown folks even less represented at the higher ranks, the chief level, the president level of organizations? And I think there's a lot of answers to that question. And then there's a lot of questions that come from that question as well. But I think just, using a bit of my perspective, I'll begin with that there's a culture that needs to be addressed in terms of how presidents, chief level executives come to be. How do you reach those positions? A lot of times there's not an objective process. So it's not that you work for 10 years, you manage people for 5 years, and you get this degree, and then you are qualified for this role.
Mhm.
Oftentimes there's so many intangibles and subjective requirements to be considered, even considered for that level of role. It's not about how great of work you've done. It's the subjective criteria that's also, being used to qualify a candidate. So I think culturally, there are certain areas that need to be addressed. I think we'd be remiss not to acknowledge that we're the idea of black executives is still a relatively new one when we look at the timeline of the sports industry, right? Sports have been around since America has been around in some form or fashion. And the idea of black and brown people running those industries is still a really new one.
Mhm.
So, this isn't to say that we should be patient, but this is to say that culture shifts don't often happen overnight. Um, and then there's what I've seen, there's oftentimes a lack of awareness. When I talk to students, for example, at HBCUs about careers in sports and entertainment, excuse me, 70% of the students we interview say they want to be an agent. And that that career path, very few people actually end up on. And so, how are we educating HBCU students, future leaders in sports, on the actual opportunities to get involved in sport business? Um, so I think again, and that's scratching the surface of that challenge for not even just sports, but across all industries.
Mhm.
But I think those are some of the things that contribute to the representation that we see.
Right, right. I feel like that, us being African American, I think that, because a lot of you are right, a lot of like even a lot of friends who I know who are in sports management, that's the first thing that they say. They'd be like, "Oh, I want to be a sports agent." But for one, like they don't necessarily know how to get into it or the right steps to take to if they want to be a sports agent or if they're, how there's always multiple ways to get your foot in the door. It might not be a sports agent at first, but you might start off doing something else and then, finding that niche later on. Um, but yeah, I do think that knowing, what it takes and how it takes definitely can help, us as HBCU students just in that goes for any profession, but mainly for sports management world. So the next question I wanted to ask you was that as far as blacks and racism is concerned, as far as blacks and racism is concerned in the sports world, what do you think about the the media coverage aspect of that when it comes to raising awareness against, discrimination issues, whether it be, a black on white situation or, how a lot of blacks in the sports world get passed up on job offers and they give it to somebody who doesn't necessarily have the experience that they've had um or um, or just as a overall um, mistreatment of an African American in the in just in the sports world, whether it be a player or uh, a student trying to find their way into getting a job in the sports world or like a coach or anything like that. How do you feel that the media plays in all of that?
So I think generally speaking, media plays a huge role in terms of how stories are told and how information is shared, right? So when we have incidents that happen involving race or racism, whether they are violent incidents or even things that are more subtle, how the story is told, how the story is picked up, how that story is shared has a great impact on what happens next. And now, whether or not that's fair, aside, I think that's part of the truth that we experience. And again, I think that truth exists in sports and beyond sports. I think what makes sports unique in this space is that there's an opportunity for the story to be told from many perspectives. Um, and there may be incidents where there's a story taking happening in real time that it feels like we can all tune into, right? So when we hear things about, I mean, let's use Kaepernick. Probably not the best example, but whether the media told that story or not in meaningful ways, every Sunday it felt like we could tune in and watch in real time what's happening with this story, right? And then introduce the advent of social media, and now we all become storytellers ourselves. And obviously, depending on your following, 100, 1,000, 100,000, that's your audience. That's the people who are listening to the stories that you tell. So I think that's the role of media. And I think, probably to your question is more, is there a mechanism to hold media accountable for telling the stories that are damning to our community, that are doing damage, right? When there's an incident of racism, but no one ever hears about it, right? Now the power of media is immediately stamped out because it's not leveraged. And I think sadly, media, there's certain interests that they exist to serve. Depending, and that changes depending on who's telling the story. End of the day, eyeballs is usually the primary concern. So if there's an incident of racism that's going to bring a large audience to this story, or a large audience to our channel, then perhaps it is covered. So I think that's the tough part with media, but I think there's an important in an ecosystem of, I mean, even just awareness. Media plays an invaluable role in being sure that stories are told. And so I guess, what we want to do is make sure those stories are told accurately, and objectively.
Do you think that um, as far as the social media goes, do you think that when it comes to saying, well, mainly African Americans, when African Americans take to social media about how they feel in regards to what is going on, and sometimes it may include positive reinforcement or negative backlash. Do you think that the how do you feel about them continually being vocal about wanting a press for change in um, whatever whatever situation, whatever racist situation that's going on in society that they're having to deal with? How do you what do you think about athletes being more vocal in it, or do you think there's a time to be vocal and there's a time when they shouldn't be as vocal as, because like social media is just it's very big, and everybody's it's constantly on to the next big thing. And so when it comes to athletes, or student athletes, when it comes to voicing their opinion, you know, and let's just say, for example, let's just say a college athlete goes and voices their opinion on social media about a situation that's happening at the university, right? But then the people above them, you know, the higher ups or the higher ups, they just feel like that student athlete shouldn't be giving their opinion on, something that has been detrimental to them, because they feel that it could be harmful to from the university aspect, or from just the what's the word I'm looking for, just the they don't want to they don't want to have to feel like they are going to receive the negative backlash that comes with that when they bring those issues to the light. So basically, some athletes feel like, that not all athletes, but some athletes might feel like being quiet on those issues until somebody else brings it up, and then might be the best thing to do, because you know how some situations one person might bring it up, and then all of a sudden when a lot of people start rallying behind them, then they, say, okay, well now I have the comfortability to express the situations that have happened to me. So do you think they should be more silent in that regard, or do you think that when something like that happens to them, they should be more vocal about it?
This is another one where I'm going to answer, and then you tell me if I'm on the right path in terms of what you're asking. Generally speaking, for athletes, student athletes, my position is that there is a time for you to be vocal, and that time is whenever you feel it's appropriate. I don't think anyone should force you to be silent, nor should anyone force you to speak.
Mm.
Uh, so I think that that's totally up to the individual, and I think that individual has to take into account. They do have to take into account the communities that they represent, and that could land in a few different ways. I might look at my university and say, me being vocal on this topic is going to cause a stir, and that's not necessary. That's not appropriate. That's not the outcome that I want. Or I might look at my university and say, me being vocal is going to cause a stir, and that's exactly what we need in this moment. So it all comes down to that individual's perspective. I would say you just have to be clear on your intentions, clear on your desired outcome. Um, because again, going back to Colin Kaepernick, the moment that he took a knee, there were a million different stories as to why, as to what he wants to achieve, as to what he's trying to do. Everything from he's mad because he's not getting playing time to he hates the military. So you've got to know your why and be willing and able to stand strong on that. And then that's another case study. I mean, that same case study we can look at times, the choice to be vocal, the choice to be outspoken may come with consequences, and you have to be okay with that. You can fight against it, but oftentimes we don't have systems in place to protect
Mm.
uh, when something catches a wildfire like that, and especially in the media. Um, so I think it's just understanding those things, understanding that there is risk involved. But again, generally for me, I think there is a time to be vocal, and that time is whenever an individual decides it's appropriate.
I completely agree with you. I do think that, I think, athletes, student athletes, or just anybody in general, when they go to voice their opinion about something, I think that, sometimes even, that goes for, just regular human beings like myself, even when it comes to voicing things of the matter, sometimes we don't think about everything that could come from, you know, us voicing our opinion on like on a specific, situation that happened. Like we don't be like, okay, well, I can address the issue, but then I'm not looking at, okay, well, down the line it might, affect me here or here or here. But I did get my point across. So it's just like we got to take into accountability of the whole overall aspect of it, when it comes to, voicing our opinions on situations that have happened and are kind of, above and I don't want to say out of our control, but at the same time, something that, is very like racism and things of that sort is a very touchy subject going on today. So I just think we just all gotta just be mindful of how we go about voicing our opinion, basically.
Yeah, no.
But just the last thing I want to ask you, is just based off what you have been doing for HBCU students. What are your goals? What are your future goals, and the things that you are hoping to accomplish down the line? That makes sense. What do you want to?
Our vision, we really envision an industry, sports and entertainment, just having more representation, more voices from the HBCU community represented in the high ranks. Obviously, that's a vision that will take time because we need representation and we need folks to be able to work up the ranks.
Mhm.
But ultimately, we want to see our communities considered and represented as this industry grows. We want to see our brain power born within the walls of our institutions in position to lead teams, to lead leagues, to lead initiatives that focus in sport, because there is such power in this industry, a power that's not really present in many other industries, in my opinion. And I believe that having our leaders from our campuses steering that power
Mhm.
will create a more impactful industry. I truly believe that. So that's our vision. That's our primary goal. I think, short term, we want to continue to increase our reach on campuses, want to continue to enhance the way that we go about educating students, and just making sure that students begin their careers in sports with opportunities that are fulfilling and to put them in position to create is a lifestyle that they can be comfortable with. So that's our immediate focus.
Well, last thing, how would, if somebody were to want to get into your program, what is something that, just for the audience, what is something that they would have to um, do to, I guess, show that they're serious? Because obviously you don't want anybody to come into, your program that's not fully dedicated and uh, fully aspired to, do something that they love. That makes sense. So, um, what is something that, or what is something that you look for in an applicant that is trying to get into your program?
For sure, and I will have to jump after this question, but we're looking for. Let me tell you what we're not looking for. We're not looking at GPA. We're not looking at classification, and we're not looking at major. As far as a specific criteria, the only box that has to be checked to qualify for our program is that you're interested in sports and entertainment as a career option. From there, we do look for characteristics. We look for things like we want to know about your availability. If you sign up and commit to our program, are you actually able to show up for all of our sessions when we do things in person? Are you able to come and participate? We don't hold that against student athletes when they have commitments. Obviously, they need to honor those. But we are looking for students who can make a commitment and honor it. We're looking for desire. It's one thing to say you want to work in sports. It's another thing to prove it. Have you volunteered? Have you gotten involved in your athletic department? Have you found an internship? Have you built something? What are you doing to reach that goal of working in sports and entertainment? If nothing, then you really, you want to give some thought to how you could be intentional about that. We're also looking for competence, whether it's writing samples, other ways of expressing that you have the acumen, the skills, the ability to be successful in the industry. And then other things like punctuality, show up on time, start on time. Are you able to you carry yourself respectfully in those environments? Integrity, So I think those are the things that we're looking for characteristic wise, and we do so via applications. But applications and interviews. Anyone interested can learn more at our website, www.thebsba.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. That's where we share a lot of our information. And applications will be open in the next few weeks. So I think this would be a good time to be checking in.
Well, I greatly appreciate this opportunity to interview you, Pearson, and I hope to see and hear good things about your business and things of that soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Best luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Take care.